full set there? Here's a few. Oh, here we go. Oh wait, where's my nice big print edition? Where did it go? Now using my big print edition. Oh, there it is.
So today's Stephen Wolf is doing Ten Commandments, only one.
Okay.
Moshe's doing the rest.
Great.
And Warren said he might do the Haftarah.
Okay.
So if not, I'll just do it.
Okay. Fabulous. Shabbat Shalom. So here we are on the 16th of Av. Yesterday was the 15th, Tu B'Av. We had a beautiful, beautiful Friday night Kabbalat Shabbat service that the Cantor led, emphasizing the theme of love. And we went from Tisha B'Av to loss and destruction, Saturday night and Sunday of last week, to Tu B'Av, with its emphasis on the possibility of love and regeneration. And today we come to Shabbat Nachamu, the Shabbat in which Isaiah reminds us that we are to be comforted as we begin this 7-week period toward Rosh Hashanah. We are thrilled that Rabbi Dr. Steve Brown is with us and will be our darshan, be offering us a Devar Torah a little bit later in the service. We'll be looking forward to that. In the meantime, I'm going to lead you in some morning prayers, Psuke de Zimra. Before we just go into these pages that we start turning, I want to just invite you to just spend a moment reflecting on maybe closing your eyes for a moment and just acknowledging that after a long, long wave of heat, you woke up to a morning where there was actually a small chill in the air. And what a blessing that is on this gorgeous sunny day. And before we begin our prayers, we can remind ourselves that the entire enterprise of Jewish worship is to remind ourselves of the blessings in our midst. That's why we pray. And so before we actually start saying words and turning pages, just take a moment and perhaps remind yourself of one thing that you have gratitude for, and that you start your prayers with that sense of feeling blessed and feeling grateful for the gift of your life. We begin our service giving thanks for the gift of this day. Page 61. Modeh ani lefanecha, melech chai v'kayam, shechezarta b'nishmati b'chemla, b'chemla rabba emunatecha. Modeh ani lefanecha, melech chai v'kayam, shechezarta b'nishmati v'chemla, V'chemla Rabba emunatecha, Rabba emunatecha, Rabba emunatecha. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Turn with me to page 63 as we continue the second paragraph, as we thank God for the gift of our souls, of our neshamot. Elohai neshama shenatata biteho rahi. Elohai neshama shenatata biteho rahi. Elohai neshama shenatata biteho rahi. If you're able to rise, Birkot HaShachar, page 65. As I often invite you to do, we go through these rather quickly. Perhaps there's one bracha that's yours for this Shabbat. Page 65. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lasech v'ivina l'havchin ve'en yom u've'en layla. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani b'tzalmo. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, malbish arumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, zokev kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, rok haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shasali kol tzarkim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamechin mitzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, ozei Yisrael bigvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, otei Yisrael b'tifara. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hanoten li ayev koach. As we are seated, we continue. Baruch atah. Uhutneinu hayom v'chayom l'chein l'chesed rachamim v'necha u'beinei kol reinu tigalenu chasadim tovim. Baruch atah Adonai gomel chasadim tovim le'amo Yisrael. Yiratzon melefanecha. Rebound kol halamim hatzadikeinu makim lecha ma yeshuateinu makoteinu. Aval anachnu amcha b'nei britecha, lefichach anachnu chayavim lehodot lecha. Ahashreinu ma tov chalkeinu u'ma na'im goraleinu u'ma yafa yerushateinu. Ahashreinu shenachta mashkemim marivim erev havoker v'omrim pamayim b'chol yom Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Page 67. Atahu l'shelav nivot ha'olam Kadesh et shimcha makdishei shemecha v'kadesh et shimcha v'olamecha v'shuatcha tarim v'tagbi ha'karnenu Baruch atah Adonai v'kadesh et shimcha b'arabim. If you will, turn ahead with me to page 72 as we continue with the Psalm for Shabbat. Page 72. Yom Shabbat Kodesh, Shabo Hayu Halivim Omrim B'Veit HaMikdash, Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbat, Tov Lahodot Ladonai, U'Lazamer L'Shimcha Elyon. Magadlu Masechaya Mehoram Ku Machshevotecha Magadlu Masechaya Mehoram Ku Machshevotecha. Od Yunuvum Veseva Deshanim Ranim Yehiyu Lahagid Ki Ashar Adonai Tzuri V'Lahav Latavo. We'll turn ahead to page 81 as we continue with Psalm 30. Mizmor Shir Chanukat Habayit LeDavid. Shem Ha'Adonai V'Chaneni Adonai Ozer Li. Shem Ha'Adonai V'Chaneni Adonai Shema Adonai V'Chaneni Adonai Ozeli. Ha'hafachta misperim acholi Pitachta saki v'ta'azreni simcha Lema'an yisamecha chavo v'lo yidom Adonai Elohai le'olam odeka. We invite those in the process of mourning or observing a yard site, those who are with us, those who are on Zoom or on live stream, to rise and join with me. Kadisha Tome, page 82. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Bi'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael b'agala u'v'zman kariv v'yimru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach li'olam olmei olmaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitalev v'yithalal shemei d'kudashah b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechemata, damiran v'alma v'yimru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. Amen. We continue now on page 83, Baruch She'amar, if you're able to rise. Baruch She'amar v'hayalam, Baruch Hu, Baruch Oseh v'reshit, Baruch Omer v'haseh, Baruch Omer kayem, Baruch merachem al haaretz, Baruch merachem al habriot, Baruch mishalem sachar tov l'rehav, Baruch ha'ala v'kayam la'netzach, Baruch podehu matzil, Baruch Shema. Yahachid chel mimelech mishubach umfarchet adeyad shemo hagadol baruch atadonai
Baruch Baruch Shemo.
melech mehulal vatishbachot. We are seated. Turn with me to page 92, the great Hallel Ki Le'olam Chasto. Where has God's chesed shown up for you in this week that is now ending? Or where have the hands of God's chesed? Perhaps there's a human embodying God's presence who was a source of chesed for you in this week. Review your week, and I bet if you think about it, you can find innumerable acts of chesed that you were the recipient of, or perhaps the deliverer of, to someone who could have used it. Page 92. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki le'olam chasto. Hodu le'Elohe ha'Elohim, ki le'olam chasto. Hodu l'Adonai ha'Adonim, ki le'olam chasto. V'yoseh nifla'ot gedolot levado, ki le'olam chasto. Le'yoseh hashamayim b'tavuna, ki le'olam chasto. Le'rokah ha'aretz al hamayim, ki le'olam chasto. Yoseh orim gedolim, ki le'olam chasto. Shemesh lememshalet bayom, ki le'olam chasto. 4 lines from the bottom. Shabish filenu zachar lanu, ki le'olam chasto. Vayifrekenu mitzareinu, ki le'olam chasto. Noten lechem lecha basar, ki le'olam chasto. Hodu le'el hashamayim, ki le'olam chasto. Page 96. Ashrei Yoshvei Ve'techa Od Hallelujah, Od Hallelujah Selah. Shem Shkachalo, Shem Shalom. Hilal Davir Mincham Gedor Nemelam. Kavod malchut 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 kol ha'amim shatach avachot or enei chodach seperu poteach et yadecha umasbir lechol chai ratzon Tehilat Adonai yedaber Vivarech kol basar, Shem kodsho le'olam vahed, va'anachnu nevarech ya, me'ata v'yad olam, hallelujah. Page 100. Hallelujah, 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 El Bekadsho, hallelujah, hallelujah, Berki Ahuzo, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, v'gvurotav. Hallelujah, hallelujah, kerov good love. Hallelujah, 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 shofar, hallelujah, hallelujah, v'nevel v'chinor, hallelujah, 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 b'tov u'machol, hallelujah, hallelujah, b'minim ve'ugav, hallelujah, 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 b'tzil tzlei shama, hallelujah, hallelujah, b'tzil tzlei truah, kol haneshama tehallel, hallelujah, hallelujah, kol haneshama tehallel, hallelujah, kol haneshama tehallel, hallelujah. Baruch Adonai, Baruch Elohim Elohei Yisrael Asenef Leot Levado, Baruch Shem Kavado Li'olam, V'imalev Chodo Et Kol Ha'aretz. Amen v'amen. We invite you to rise as we turn now to page 101 and prepare to cross the sea. Vayevarech David elei Malkaho. Atahu Arnei levadecha ta'aseh et hashamayim shemei hashamayim. Atahu Adonai Elohim asher b'charta ba'Avraham v'hotzeto me'oher kasdim v'samta shmo Avraham u'matzata levavo ne'aman lefanecha v'charoti motor v'hayam bakati lifnehem v'yavru v'toch hayam v'yavasha v'yedro v'yishlach tavim tzalot k'mo even v'mayim azim. Page 102. V'haya Yisrael tayata gedola asher asa Adonai b'Mitzrayim v'yir ha'am et Adonai v'yamina v'Adonai u'v'Moshe avdo as yashir Moshe v'Yisrael Ozi v'zimrat yah v'yili Lishua Ozi Ozi v'zimrat yah v'yili Lishua Ozi v'zimrat yah v'yili Lishua Zimrat Yah Vayhili Lishua Zeliv Yom Dehu Min Charnet Ratzonah Micha Mochanan Rabbi Kodesh Not Rechot Osefel Shamu Amim Yirgazu Adonai Imloch Le'olam Vahed Adonai Imloch Le'olam Vahed Ki l'Adonai Amlucha Moshe V'Goyim V'alu Moshim Bar Tzion Lishpot Et Har Esav V'yital Adonai Hamlucha V'haya Adonai Melcho Kol Ha'aretz V'yom Hahu Yeh Adonai Echad Nushemav Please be seated for a moment, a short kavanah before we head into the Shachrit service. So I want to just invite you to consider that in many, many myths from many cultures across the world, there is a story that has to happen for a hero who has to go on a long and difficult journey. A long and difficult journey with many battles to fight. Jack, Belitsky, Mr. Belitsky, Jack, could you talk to outside the room for a second? Thank you. It's a little hard to hear. Thank you. So there is a journey that happens in many, many myths across cultures about a hero who has to go out and slay monsters, dragons, oppressors in order to complete the journey. But what often ends up happening as a result of all of those battles is that the hero has to actually come to understand that what he or she was looking for was actually in their own backyard and was in the place where they had started from. But they just needed to go on that journey in order to be able to see what was already there. And the reason I bring up this truth about so many myths is because in a sense, and we're going to be listening to Dr. Brown speak about the Parsha, is that there's a way in which Moshe, here in our Parasha, is that hero who's led our people through all these journeys and has been through so much with a stiff-necked people, constantly giving him grief, questioning his leadership, complaining. And yet he is told again that he will not enter the promised land. And not only does God say that Moses is not going to enter, but God says something that can be seen a little bit as a bit of cruelty. God says to Moshe, Ravlach, you have enough. You have so much. Ravlach. So what's God saying? Right? God instructs Moshe to go to the top of the mountain in order to get the clear view of all the directions around him, in order perhaps to teach Moshe that, in fact, he has already arrived, even if he hasn't entered the land physically. And that is a very, very powerful truth about our own lives, which is we often search for the promised land, which is a preconceived notion of what our lives should look like, right? We should have more money, we should be thinner, we should have more prestige, we should be living in a certain place. We go around our lives with all of these visions of what we think it is, that if we only had X, we would be in our own promised land. But part of what God may be saying to Moshe, when God says, Ravlach, you have so much, is that really, if each and every one of us could drop some of those preconceived notions of what the promised land is meant to be, we might be able to understand that we're already in it. That maybe what we have in our lives is more than enough. And that our emphasis and our insistence on something that if, can only get to there, if I only had this, is in fact the very obstacle towards being able to arrive. So as much as we on the Pshat level think, yeah, it's kind of cruel of God to deny Moshe after all that Moshe has done, maybe what God is saying to Moshe here is that if you can climb up, get the expanse from the larger view, and not only look at the world through what your own preconceived understandings of what it is you think you need, you might find that it's already right here, right in front of you. And after all that journeying, all that you need to do is come back and say thank you for what we already have. May we be blessed with the awareness of the many gifts that are already here for us. Shabbat Shalom. We'll continue page 104 with Nishmat Kol Chai. Nishmat Kol Chai Tevarech et Shimcha Adonai Eloheinu V'kol basar Lufinu Malei Shira Ein אנחנו מספיקים להודות לך ממצרים גאלתנו עלינו בית עבדים על כן עברין שבלעת בנו נהלך נשבחך נפארך נברך את שם קודשך כאמור לדוד ברכי נפשי את אדוני וכל קרבי את שם קודשו האל בתתומות עוזך הגדול בכבוד שבך הגיבור לנצח ונורא ונורותיך המלך היושב על כיסא רם ונישא. Chazan Agar will be leading us Shochenad, middle of page 105.
Shochenad marom vekadosh shemo וכתוב לנו תקים בנו אלי שרים נאווה תהילה בפי ישרים תתהלל ובדברי צדיקים תתפרח ובלשון חסידים תתרומם ובקרב קדושים תתקדש ובמקלות רביבות עמך בית ישראל דור ודור שכן הודות לפניך אדוננו אל אבותינו להודות לשבח ולנדר ולקלס על כל דברי שירות ותשבחות דוד בן ישי עבדך משיחך. Please rise, page 106. ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו. ברכות גדולות מעתה ויד עולם ברוך אתה אדוני אל מלך גדול בתשבחות אל ההודעות אדון הנפלאות הבוחר בשירי זמרה מלך אלוקי העולמים יתקדש ויתקדש שמי רבה ביעלמה דברי קירותי וימלך מלכותי בחייכון ומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל בגליו יזמע קריב ויאמרו אמן. שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעלמי ימיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ותבדלה לשמי דקודשה בריחו לעילא מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה ויאמרו אמן. ברכו את אדוני המבורך ברוך המבורך לעולם ועד. You may be seated. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מכל העולם יוצר ברך חושך עושה שלום ובורא את הכל. הכל יודוך והכל ישבחוך והכל יאמר קדוש כאדוני. אין כי ירכך בעולם הזה ואין זולתך מלכנו לחיי העולם הבא אפס בלתך גול לימות המשיח ואין דומה לך מושיענו לתחיית המתים. Chazan.
needs to lead us.
No, I'm Sisi. I got
you're
demoted.
Shlishi.
My agent's negotiating a new contract for me, Rabbi.
Page 108.
El Adon
Hakol hamasim baruch
umborach
Befi kol neshama gadlo v'tuvo malei olam da'atu tmuna sovim oto hamid kahei ayot HaKodesh נדר בכבוד על המרחבה זכות ומישור לפני כיסו חסד ורחמים לפני כבודו טובים מאורות שברא אלוהינו יצרם בדעת בבינה ובשכל כוח וגבורה נתן בהם להיות מושלים בקרב תבל מלאים זיו ופיקים הנוגה נזיבם בכל העולם שמחים בצאתם וששים בבואם עושים בהם הרצון קונם פיאר בכבוד נותנים לשמו צלה ורינה לזכר מלכותו קרא לשמש ויזרחו רעה והתקין צורה לבנה שבח נותנים לו קוצב המרום תפארת וגדולה שרפים ואופנים וחיות HaKodesh. Continuing page 109.
לרשת מכל המעשים ביום השביעי. או נקרא ליום השבת זה שבח שלום. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני לפיך כבוד. ואמר יורש תפרוך הסלע, page 110, תתברך צורנו מלכנו וגואלנו, בורא קדושים ישתבח שמך מלכנו. כולם אהובים, כולם ברורים, כולם גיבורים, וכולם עושים בהמה ורצון קונם, וכולם פותחים את פיהם בקדושה, ובתורה בשירה, ובזמרה, ומברכים שבחים פארים ארצים הקדישים, וממליכים את שם האל המלך, הגדול הגיבור והנורא הקדוש הוא. וכולם מקבלים עליהם עול מלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונותנים רשות זה לזה להקדיש ליוצרם בנחת רוח, בשפה וברורה ונימה קדושה, כולם כחדונים ויאמרים ביראה, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך כל הארץ כבודו, והאופנים וחיות הקודש ברעש גדול וזמרת שרפים למטה משבחים ויאמרים ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו, ברוך נמות ייתנו למלך החי וקיים. אור חדש על ציון תאיר, 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 ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו, ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו. ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות.
Continuing page 111.
אהבה רבה אהבתנו, Adonai Eloheinu, Chemla gedola v'tera, Chamalta aleinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Ba'avur avoteinu, Shebatechu Becha, Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu Malkeinu. והיירננו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ויחד לבבינו לאהבה וליראה את שמך, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא בטחנו, נגילה ונשמחה, נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך. ואבינו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ, ותוליכנו קוממיות לארצנו, כי אבוא אל ישועתך, ובנו בחרת מכל עם ולשון, והרפתנו לשמך הגדול, סלע סלע באמת, להודות לך וליחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר ביעמו ישראל באהבה. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו בעת. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך. והיה אם שמעו תשמעו מצוותי אשר אנוכי מצוותכם היום לאהבה. נתתי אסל ישמרו לכם בנפתי לבבכם ושדכם ושמתם את דברי אל לבבכם נפשכם וקשתנותם.
ושמתם את דברי אל לבבכם.
לדבר בה בשבתך בביתך לתחוות הרשע. למען ירבו ימיכם ימי בניכם על האדמה אשר נשבע אדוני לאבותיכם לתת להם כימי השמיים על הארץ. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם ויעשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לתורותם ונתנו על ציצית הכנף פתיל תכלת והיה לכם לציצית וריתם אותו וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריכם למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם אמת ויציב נקום לקיים השנה וטוב ויפה הדבר הזה עלינו לדור ודור וקיים ושמקיים בחיסון נכון ומלכותו ואמונתו לעד קיימת ודבריו חיים וקיימים על אבותינו ועלינו בנינו ודורותינו ושמחים דבר טוב וקיים עלינו אמת אמת שעתה אבותינו מלכנו מלך אבותינו גואלנו גואל אבותינו יוצא תשועתנו פדים מצילים על שמך אין אלוהים זולתך
114.
עזרת אבותינו אתה הוא מעולם מגן מושיע לבניכם אחריכם בכל דור ודור ברום עולם אשרי איש שישמע למצוותיך ותורתך ודבריך אמת אתה הוא הראשון ואתה הוא האחרון ים סוף פקד רם וניסה גדול ונורא משפילים נקביש תהילתם ברוך הוא מבורך משה ובני ישראל לקנו שירה בשמחה רבה ויאמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורא תהילות אוסף אלה שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים לשמך שפתיים יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ויאמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם
We invite you to rise.
צור ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל ובדרכנו בך יהודה וישראל גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
Join together with Chazan, page 115b.
אדוני שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו אלוהי אברהם אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב אלוהי שרה אלוהי רבקה אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון גומל חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות, ומביא גואל לבני בניהם, למען שמו ביחווה. מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה רב ליושיע, מוריד הטל, מקלקל חיים בחסד, בחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומק נופלים ברופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בגבורות ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיי ומצמיח ישועה. ונאמרת לך חיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים.
נקדש גם בגללם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמם אברהם, ככתוב ביד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ויאמר.
נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה לזה ויאמר.
קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו.
קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו. אז בקול רעש גדול, אדיר וחזק, משמיעים קול. אז בקול רעש גדול, אדיר וחזק, משמיעים קול. מתנסים לעומת סרפים, מתנסים לעומת סרפים, מתנסים לעומת סרפים, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו.
ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו.
ברוך אלי ממקומו, ממקומך מלכנו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו, כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך? תמלוך בציון, בקרוב בימינו. לעולם ועד, לעולם ועד תשכון. תתקדל ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים עירך, לדור ודור ולנצח נצחים. ועינינו תראנה, תראנה מלכותך, כדבר אמור בשירי עוזך, עד משיח צדקך.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהיך ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהיך ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור נגיד גודלך. לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור נגיד גודלך. ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, קדושתך נקדיש. ושכחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, וימוש לעולם ועד. לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור נגיד גודלך. לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור נגיד גודלך. כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה, וקדוש וקדוש אתה, כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה, וקדוש וקדוש אתה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. ישמח משה מלכך ביעמדו לפניך על הר סיני ושני לוחות, וכתוב בהם שמירת שבת, וכן כתוב בתורתך ושמרו ונסתר שבת ונפש ולא נתתו אדוני להם לגוי ארצות ולא נתתו. זרע יעקב אשר בם בחרת מקדשי שביעי.
טוב שמך, לכם אלוהות שמך. Those of you who are still davening, we invite you to continue to do so. Those of you concluded, you feel free to be seated. As we conclude the Shachrit service, page 138, Kaddish Shalem.
יתקדש שמי רבה, ביעלמה דברי קירותי והמליך מלכותי בחייכון ומכל נחלו בית ישראל בגלה בזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. ישמי רבה מבורך לעולם עולם מעמיה יתברך יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתבטל להשם בידי קודשה בריחו לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה ותשבחתה ונחמתה דמירן ביעלמה ואמרו אמן. תתקבע ותכון נבע ותכון דכל ישראל כל המבואהון דלשמיא ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה משמיא וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום ממרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
We're going to pause briefly to wish each and every one of you Shabbat Shalom. Very nice to have you all here with us as we celebrate Shabbat. We want to also, first of all, we're thrilled. I mentioned it, yes I did, at the very beginning of the service I did. Before you arrived, because yesterday was Tu B'Av, although today is not Tu B'Av anymore, but we definitely mentioned it at the beginning of the service. All right, not only does he want to be Chazan Shlishi, but he wants to be Rav Sheni. Okay, this guy's taking up space here, I'm telling you. So we want to, first of all, we're very thrilled that Stephanie Love is going to come and read the Aseret HaDibrot for us, as she does twice a year, very frequently at Beth Shalom, and we are looking forward to hearing that at the very beginning, the first Aliyah. And we are as this is going to be my first time meeting Moshe Hezekiah, who is here and has been reading Torah for us the last couple of Shabbatot while I have been away. We may have had a little bit of a miscommunication on how much Torah Moshe may be reading and Warren may be reading, and the Cantor's negotiating that right now. So we may have had a little bit of a miscommunication, but we are very excited that Moshe is here to read Torah for us, and we are also very excited to learn Torah from my good friend and colleague and mentor, Rabbi Dr. Steve Brown, who will be offering us the Devar Torah a little later in the morning. So we're going to continue now with the Torah service. We invite you to turn to page 139 as we continue. Page 139.
Ein kamoka v'Elohim Adonai v'yein kemasecha malechutecha malechut kol olamim u'memeshaltecha bechol dor v'dor Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai Moloch Leolam Vaed Adonai Oz Le'amo Yitein Adonai Yivarech Et Amo V'Shalom Avarachamim Heitiv Aviretzoncha Et Tzion Tivnei Chomot Yerushalayim Tivnei Chomot Yerushalayim Ki Vecha Levad Batachnu Melech El Ram Benisa Adonai
Kuma Adonai v'yafutzu oivecha v'yanusu misanecha mipanecha ki mitzion tetzei Torah ki mitzion tetzei Torah u'devar Adonai miYerushalayim Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'Kedushato. Continuing now, page 140. Be'anarachetz v'lishme kadisha kadisha yakira ana emartu shpechan be'anarachetz v'lishme kadisha Kadisha Yakira Ana Emartu Shvechan Yeheira Ava Kodamach Detiftach Libi Beoraita Vetashli Mishalin Delibi Veliba Decholamach Yisrael Letavu Lechayin V'lishlam. Amen. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo. Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu kadosh Shema.
Galilu l'Adonai ite udromema shemo yachdav le'Adonai
Hagedola ve'hagevura ve'hatiferet ve'hanetzach ve'hahod Ki hashamayim uvah Ki hashamayim uvah Adonai hamamlacha Yamid na'aseh lechol erod Ramemu Adonai Eloheinu Vehishtachavu Lehadam raglav kadoshu Ramemu Eloheinu Vehishtachavu Lehar kadsho Hikadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Once again, Shabbat Shalom. We are looking forward to starting with the Aseret HaDibrot, which the opening of this parasha for us will be beginning the opening of chapter 5, page 1015 of your Chumash. And in just a few psukim, as Stephanie begins chanting, we'll invite people to rise as we listen to the Aseret HaDibrot. When we get to verse 6 on page 1016. I think we're going to have 3 generations of the women of this family come up for this Aliyah. B'yazur b'geim l'shil chosim bo v'nomar. Amen. Hakol habu godel l'hedlu chavod la'torah. Ta'amdu. Start from Arbat. Abraham Moshe. Basha Rivka. Bat Yosef. Ufredo. Rishonot, Baruch Shnatan Torah Li'amo Yisrael B'Kedushato, V'atem V'Gimkim Adonai Elohechem, Chaim Kulchem Hayom.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol hamim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. Amen. Vayikra Moshe el kol Yisrael, vayomer alehem, Shema Yisrael et hachukim v'et hamishpatim, Asher Anochi Dover Boznechem Hayom Ulamadatem Otam Ushmartem Lasotam Adonai Eloheinu Karati Manu Brit Bechorev Lo et Avotenu Karat Adonai et Abrit Hazot Ki Itanu Anachnu Elefo Hayom Kulanu Chaim Panim befanim, diber Adonai imachem, bahar mitoch ha'esh. Anochi omed ben Adonai u'vnechem ba'et ha'hi, lehagid lachem et devar Adonai, ki iretem mipnei ha'esh, v'lo alitem bahar lemor.
I invite you to rise.
Anochi Adonai Elohecha asher hotzeiticha me'eretz Mitzrayim mibeit avadim lo yehi lecha Elohim acherim al panai lo taseh lecha fesel kol tmunai אשר בשמיים ממעב אשר בארץ מתחת ואשר במים מתחת לארץ לא תשתחווה להם ולא תעבדם כי אנוכי אדוני אלוהיך אלקנה פוקד עוון אבות הבנים והשלישים הרבעים לשונאי ועושה חסד לאלפים לאוהבי ושומרי מצוותי לא תישא את שם אדוני אלוהיך לשווא כי לא ינקה אדוני את אשר שא את שמו לשווא שמור את יום השבת לקדשו כאשר ציווך אדוני אלוהיך ששת ימים תעבוד ועשית כל מלאכתך ביום השביעי שבת לאדוני אלוהיך לא תעשה כל מלאכה אתה ובנך וביתך ועבדך ואמתך ושערך וחומרך וכל בהמתך וגרך אשר בשערך למען ינוח עבדך ואמתך כמוך וזכרת כי עבד היית בארץ מצרים ויוציאך אדוני אלוהיך משם ביד חזקה ובזרוע נטויה על כן ציווך אדוני אלוהיך לעשות את יום השבת כבד את אביך ואת אמך כאשר ציווך אדוני אלוהיך למען יאריכון ימיך ולמען ייטב לך על האדמה אשר אלוהיך נותן לך לא תרצח ולא תנאף ולא תגנוב ולא תענב רעך את שווא ולא תחמוד אשת רעך ולא תתאווה בית רעך שדהו ועבדו ואמתו שורו וחמורו וכל אשר רעך.
יישר כוחך. Beautiful. As always. Please be seated.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. So we're going to invite Moshe to come to read the second Aliyah, which begins verse 19, as Steve takes this second Aliyah. Brachot, Ya'amod, Shmar Yahu, Ben Tuvia, Sheni, page 1021, verse 19.
Baruchu et Adonai v'varach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai v'varach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
Amen. את הדברים האלה דובר אדוני אל כל כחלקם וחל מתוך האש הענן והערפל קול גדול ולא יסף ויכתבם על שני לוחות אבנים ויתנם אלי ויהי כשמעכם את הכל מתוך החושך וההר בוער באש ותקרבון אלי כל ראשי שבטיכם וזקניכם ותאמרו הן הראנו אדוני אלוהינו את כבודו ואת גודלו ואת קולו שמענו מתוך האש. היום הזה ראינו כי ידבר אליהם, כי ידבר אלוהים את האדם והחי, ואתה למה נמות? כי תאכלנו האש הגדולה הזאת. אם יוספים אנחנו לשמוע את קול אדוני אלוהינו, עוד ומדנו כי מכל בשר אשר שמע קול אלוהים חיים ידבר מתוך האש חמונו ויחי קרב אתה ושמע את כל אשר יאמר אדוני אלוהינו, ועת תדבר עלינו את כל אשר ידבר אדוני אלוהינו אליך ושמענו ועשינו. הללויה.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. We're continuing now with the third Aliyah, which begins verse 25, page 1023. We continue as Moshe reminds the people that God only wishes life for each and every one of us. Ya'amod harav Shmuel ben Avram B'chaya Shlishi.
Baruch Adonai Amorach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. וישמע אדוני את כל דבריכם בדבריכם אליי, ויאמר אדוני אליי, שמעתי את כל דברי העם הזה, אשר דיברו אליך, היטיבו כל אשר דיברו מי ייתן, והיה לבבם זה להם, לראות אותי ולשמור את כל מצוותי, כל הימים למען ייטב לכם, ולבניהם לעולם. לך אמור לכם שובו להם, לאלוהיכם ואתה פה עמוד עמדי, ואדברה אליך את כל המצווה והחוקים והמשפטים, אשר תלמדם ועשו בארץ אשר אנוכי נותן לכם לרשתה, ושמרתם לעשות כאשר זיווה אדוני אלוהיכם, אתכם לא תסירו ימים. ושמור בכל הדרך אשר זיווה אדוני אלוהיכם, אתכם תלכו למען תחיון וטוב לכם, והארכתם ימים בארץ אשר תירשון, וזורתך מצווה חכוכים, וכמשפטים אשר זיווה אדוני אלוהיכם, ללמד אתכם לעשות בארץ אשר אתם עוברים שמה, לרשתה למען תירא את אדוני אלוהיך, לשמור את כל חוקותיו ומצוותיו אשר אנוכי מצווך אתה ובנך ובן בנך כל ימי חייך, ולמען יאריכון ימיך, ושמעת ישראל, שמרת לעשות אשר ייטב לך, ואשר תרבון מאוד כאשר דיבר אדוני אלוהי אבותיך, אחרי זבח חלב ודבש.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם אתה בתוכנו, Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. We're going to hear the Shema for the next Aliyah. The fourth Aliyah continues verse 4, page 1024 of the Chumash. Ya'amod David. Aharon ben David. Revi'i.
Baruch Hu es Adonai HaBarach. Baruch Adonai HaBarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Hamim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושננתם לבניך ודיברתם בם בשביתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובחומך וקשרתם להיות על ידיך והיו ליטטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מצוצות ביתך ובשעריך.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'sachenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. We're going to continue now with the fifth Aliyah, beginning verse 10, the top of page 1027. Ta'amod. Yehudit Masha bat Eser v'Iser v'Sara Chamishit.
Baruch Adonai HaBarach.
Naim Barach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaBarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. והיה כי יביאך אדוני אלוהיך אל הארץ אשר נשבע לאבותיך לאברהם ליצחק וליעקב לתת לך ערים גדולות וטובות אשר לא בנית ובתים מלאים כל טוב אשר לא מילאת וברות חצובים אשר לא חצבת כרמים וזיתים אשר לא נתת ואכלת ושבעת שמע לך פן תשכח את אדוני אשר הוציאך מארץ מצרים מבית עבדים את אדוני אלוהיך תירא ואותו תעבוד ובשמו תשבע לא תלכון אחרי אלוהים אחרים מאלוהי העמים אשר סביבותיכם כי אלחן אדוני אלוהיך בקרבך פן יחרף אדוני אלוהיך אדוני אלוהיך בכביש מידיך מעל פני האדמה לא תנסו את אדוני אלוהיכם כאשר ניסיתם במסע, שמות תשמרון את מצוות אדוני אלוהיכם, ועדותיו וחוקיו אשר זיווך. ועשית הישר וכטוב בעיני אדוני, למען ייטב לך, ובאת וירשת את הארץ הטובה, אשר נשבע אדוני לאבותיך, להדוף את כל אויביך מפניך, כאשר דיבר אדוני.
Baruch Adonai, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet b'chayei olam notav v'salkeinu. Baruch atah Adonai, notein haTorah.
Amen. We continue now with the sixth Aliyah, beginning verse 20, page 1028. Ya'amod, Dan Nachum,
Aryeh Halevi.
Ben Aryeh Levi, Shishi. I have to remind myself. Come up with the sixth Aliyah.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMvorach. Baruch Adonai V'rach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah.
Amen.
אמן. כי שלך בנך מה לאמור, מה העדות והחוקים והמשפטים אשר ציווה אדוני אלוהינו אתכם, ואמרת לבנך עבדים חיינו לפרעה במצרים, ויוציאנו אדוני ממצרים ביד חזק, ויתן אדוני אותות ומופתים גדולים ורעים במצרים בפרעה ובכל ביתו לעינינו, ואותנו חוצים משם למען הביא אותנו לתת לנו את הארץ אשר נשבע לאבותינו, ויצוונו אדוני לעשות את כל החוקים האלה ליראת אדוני אלוהינו לטוב לנו כל הימים לחיותנו כהיום הזה, וצדקה תהיה לנו כי נשמור לעשות את כל המצווה הזאת לפני אדוני אלוהינו כאשר ציוונו.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayalam notav b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah.
Amen. Seventh Aliyah now continues the opening of chapter 7 as we continue page 1029 of our Chumash. Ya'amdu Avram Benjamin Ben Meir Elka V'et Ratza Rivka Bat Yosef and Miriam Shvi'i.
Baruch Adonai HaMvorach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah.
Amen.
אמן. כי יביאך אדוני אלוהיך אל הארץ אשר אתה ושמע דרשתה, ונשא גויים רבים מפניך, חכיתי והגרגשי והאמורי והכנעני והפריזי והחיבי והיבוסי, שבעה גויים רבים ועצומים ממך, ונתנם אדוני אלוהיך לפניך, והכיתם אחריהם תהרים אותם, לא תכרות לכם ברית ולא תחנם ולא תתחתן. בם ביתך לא תיתן לבנו ביתו, לא תכח לבנך כי יסיר את בנך מאחרי ויעבידו אלוהים אחרים. בחר האף אדוני בכם והשמידך מהר, כי אם כה תעשו לכם מזבחותם תתעזו ומצבותם תשברו. ואשריכם תגדיעון ופסליהם תשרפון. והשקיעים קדוש אתה לאדוני אלוהיך. בך בחר אדוני אלוהיך לך חיות לא לימסגו לה מכל הימים אשר על פני האדמה. לא מרובכם מכל העמים חשך אדוני בכם ויבקר בכם, כי אתם המעט מכל העמים, כי מאהבת אדוני אתכם ומשמרו את השבוע אשר נשבע לאבותיכם. חוצי אדוני אתכם ביד חזק ויפדך מבית עבדים מיד פרעה מלך מצרים. וידעת כי אדוני אלוהיך הוא האלוהים האל על ימן שומר ברית והחסד לאוהביו ולשומרי מצוותיו לאלף דור, ומשלם לשנאיו אל פניו להעבידו לו, יאחר לשנאו אל פניו ישלם לו. שמע ושמרת את המצווה ואת חכוכים ואת המשפטים אשר אנוכי מצווך היום לעשותם.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emes v'chayei olam atah b'tokenu. Baruch atah Adonai nosein haTorah.
Amen. We want to say Yasher Koach to Moshe on the beautiful, beautiful Torah reading. We're going to pause briefly in the service at this time to invite those of you who have people in your lives in need of healing to offer a Misha Berach L'Cholim. I'm going to begin the bracha. We'll pause for some quiet and invite you to fill that silence with the names privately that you will be saying and the faces that you will be seeing of the people you know and love who are in need of healing. Misha Berach Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov Imotenu Sarah Rivka Rachel Leah Hu Yivarech V'Yirapeh Et HaCholim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimei Rachamim Alehem L'Hakizkam Rapotam V'Yishlach Lehem Me'era Refuah Shlema Min HaShamayim Refuat HaNefesh Refuat HaGuf B'toch Shacholei Yisrael Shabbat Him Lizok Hashda Bagalav Yizman Kariv V'Nomar Amen. If you're able to rise, the Chazan will lead us in the Chatzi Kaddish.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה
אמן.
ביעלמדי וראקירותי והמליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון וחיי דכל בית ישראל בגלה בגלה ובזמן קריב ויברו אמן. ישמר רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עמיה יתברך יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו מן הכל ברכתה ושירתה
ושבחתה ונחמתה תמירן ביעלמה
ויאמרו
Amen. We invite you to be seated. Warren, I'm going to call you for the Maftir Aliyah. And we want to thank Warren for his generosity of spirit, for being able to have read all of the Torah except for the, well, he could have read that too, but is going to be chanting Haftarah instead this morning. Ya'amod Zeva Kohen ben Yosef Maftir. Zen. We continue on verse 9, page 1031. Baruch Haran Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher b'chorban mikol ha'amim v'nasa l'ras t'raso. Baruch Atah Adonai nosein ha'torah.
Amen.
Amen. וידעת כי אדוני אלוהיך הוא האלוהים האל הנאמן שומרך ברית והחסד לאהביו ולשומרי מצוותיו לאלף דור ומשלם לשני אל פניו לעבידו לו יחל לשנאו אל פניו ישלם לו ושמרת אתך מצווה ואתך חוקים ואתך משפטים אשר אנוכי מצווך היום לעשותם.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher nasa לנו את הרס הנס וחי עולם תזכינו. Baruch Atah Adonai nosein ha'torah.
Amen. And again, we want to thank Moshe for that beautiful Torah reading. We invite you to rise as the Torah will now be lifted and dressed. Ya'amdu hamagbiya v'hagolelet. V'zot HaTorah Asher Tzom Moshe Lifnei Bnei Yisrael Al Ki Adonai
כי מציון תצא תורה ודבר השם מירושלים כי מציון תצא תורה
Do you have a big print? Yeah. Okay.
ברוך שנתן תורה לעמו ישראל ברוך שנתן תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו כי מציון תצא תורה ודבר השם בירושלים כי מציון תצא תורה ודבר השם בירושלים.
Well done. Yasher koach. Shkoyach. Please be seated. So as we mentioned a little earlier, the Haftarah that Warren will be chanting from the prophet Isaiah is known as Shabbat. This is called Shabbat Nachamu because of the opening words that Warren will be chanting. Nachamu, Nachamu, you should be comforted, my people, you should be comforted. And of course, this is the first Haftarah in the aftermath of Tisha B'Av, the day that commemorates destruction, tragedy, and sorrow. The question we might ask ourselves is, how is it that we, like God, should bring comfort? And I want to share with you very briefly before Warren begins a person who is a bit of a hero for me about what that might look like, a role model. for how you endure suffering that you can't quite imagine, and yet what comfort looks like in the aftermath. And so the person I'm speaking about is a Unitarian minister named Kate Braystrup, who wrote a book called Here If You Need Me, in which she tells the story about the fact that her husband Drew, who was a Maine state trooper, was killed in a car accident, leaving Kate a widow and the parent of 4 young children. Here is the quote from a book I want to share with you that I have returned to many times. She writes, "My children asked me, why did Dad die? I told them it was an accident. There are small accidents, like knocking over your milk at the dinner table. And there are large accidents, like the one your dad was in. No one meant it to happen, it just happened. And his body was too badly damaged in the accident for his soul to stay in it anymore, and so he died." And she goes and continues, "God does not spill milk. God did not bash the truck into your father's car. Nowhere in our scripture does it say God is a car accident or God is death, but rather it says God is justice and kindness, God is mercy, and always God is love. So if you want to know where God is in this or in anything, look for love." And so where do we find God in the aftermath of tragedy and destruction? We find it in the hands of people who make you dinner or come to your door and who hold you while you are weeping. And in that way, what we understand is that God's comfort comes through our ability to give comfort to those who are in need and to be God's hand and God's heart and God's love in this world. And in a sense, that is what Isaiah is saying to the Jewish people in the aftermath of Tisha B'Av. God's comfort is found in God's presence. The Haftarah is simply an acknowledgement of God's ongoing presence in the lives of the Jewish people, even after calamity and even after destruction and exile. And so we look for God's comfort through the comfort that we can provide to people in their own times of sorrow. You will find the Haftarah that Warren will be chanting on page 1033 of your Chumash.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher bachar b'nim tovim, v'ratzah v'divrei hanimrim b'emes. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher b'torah Moshe avdo, v'Yisrael amo v'mieu emes v'tzedek. Nachamu, nachamu ami, Yomar Elohechem, Dabru, Alev Yushalayim v'kiru eleha, Ki molot tzva'ah, Ki nirtzah Adonai, Ki lokab miyad Adonai, Kaf layim b'chol chatoseha, Kol korei b'midbar, Panu derech Adonai, Yirshu b'arava, Miksilo le'Eloheinu, Gam kol gei tinasei, B'chol har v'giva yishvalu, v'hoyakov l'mishar, V'hor chasim b'kiva, v'nigla kivod Adonai, v'koru chol basar yachdav, ki pi Adonai diber, kol emor kira, v'omar ma ekra, Kol basar chatzir,
V'chochasto yotzitzchov chad sodeh lovash chotzir noflot tzitz ki hu ruach Adonai nishvo Ochein chotzir ha'am Lovesh chotzir novel tzitz Udvar Yerushalayim Yokum le'olam Al kol har govoha Aliloch Mivaseret Zion Horimi v'koach kolech Mivaseret Yerushalayim Horimi El Tiroi V'amru L'orei Yehuda Hinei Elohechem Hinei Adonai Elohim B'chazak Yavo Uzro'o Moshlu Lo Hinei Schoro Ito Uv'ulaso Lefonov L'ro Edrod Lishsi Yiro V'chi V'zik V'zok Uz Lo Eho Yikabetz To'im Uv'cheitzo Yiso Olos Jinahel V'porad B'sor Arod Mayim Uv'shomayim Yazeret Tikon V'chol Shalish Atfar Ha'oretz V'zokel Palelet Horim Uv'hoz Be'oznayim V'tikein Es Ruach Adonai V'ish Yotzo Torah Enu Es Mi Chov Eitz Leave Nehu V'lamdehu Be'orach Mitzpot V'lamdehu Ba'ez V'derech Tisonu V'odenu Hein Vagoyim Mipsar Migli Uv'chashek Be'osnaim Tichoshevu Hein Miyim Chodak Yitol Ovonon Ech Dimei Va'er Uv V'chayoso Adei Ad Ein Dei Molov Agoyim Ki Ayin Negdo Nei Efes Yos Tis Your Tovo Choshvu Lo El Mid Tidam Yun El Umad Demos Ta'archu Lo Ufetzel Sonach Oresh V'tzorev V'zohov Yirak Shenu Ursukos Kesef Zoev Chasukon Terumoha Eitz Lo Yitzhak Yir Chov Nishbahot Choras Chesed Mevakesh Lo Chayim Pesel Lo Yimod Halo Tedu Halo Simou Halo to God Merosh Lachem Halo Havino Sam most os Oretz Hayoshev Achug Oretz V'yoshveho Kachagovim Hanoteh Tzachok Shomayim V'mos Choneim V'yohel Lo Shovetz Hanosein L'zor Rosnim Lo'oyin Voste Eretz Tokohu Osor Af Baldita'u Af Bal Zora'u Af Kol Sheresh Eretz Gizom Bad Nofesh Bohem Teov Te Vatishva'u Usorok Akash Tisoaim Umi Va'almi Tido Muni Vesra Yomar Kadosh Yisuch Haram Einehem Uru Min Bosor Eile Hamotzi Mibsor Tzivaham L'chulam L'shem Kor Yikroha Uvrov Onim Va'amitz Koach Ish Lo Nidor Baruch Ato Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Tzur kol olamim tzadik b'chol hadoros Ho'e'anem on Omer v'yoseh Andaber M'kayim Shekol Dvorov Emetzvot Tzedek Nemon Atahu Adonai Eloheinu v'nemonim Dvorecha V'Dvorecha Mivorecha Chor Lo Yeshuv Rekom Ki El Melech Kod Nemon V'Rachamon Ata Baruch Ato Adonai Ho'e'anem on V'chol Dvorov Rachei Matzion Ki Beis Chayenu V'lalu As Nefesh Toshia B'merov Yomenu Baruch Ato Adonai V'sameach Tzion B'voneha Samcheinu Adonai Eloheinu B'hilo V'novi Abdecha U'v'malchus Beitzovi B'shichecha B'merayavo V'yagel Libenu Al Kisor Lo Yeshev Sor V'lo Yinchalu Od Achei Rimes Kvodo Ki V'shem Kodesh Nishbato Lo Shelo Yikbenei Ro L'olam V'ed Baruch Ato Adonai Mogen David
Amen.
Al Torah V'yalo Avodo V'alamim V'yom HaShabbos Hazeh Shenosato Lanu Adonai Eloheinu L'kishav L'micha L'chovod Ol Sifores Ala Kol Adonai Eloheinu Anachnu Modim Loch U'mvorchim Osoch Yisparashim Cho B'fiko Chai Tamid L'olam V'ed Baruch Ato Adonai Mikadesh HaShabbos
Amen. Yasher Koach. You are incredible. No, you are incredible. You're incredible. want to say Yasher Koach to Warren again, having expected to be reading Torah a little bit and just chanting Haftarah for us on the fly. We very much appreciate it. We're going to invite Ira Siegel and Marge Buxbaum to lead us in the prayer for our country and the prayer for the state of Israel. We invite you to turn back to your Sidurim. If you're able to rise, it's our custom to stand as we pray both for this country and for Medinat Yisrael. We begin on page 148 with the prayer for our country.
Large print. Oh, great.
And you get the large print,
I appreciate
which some
that.
of us are very grateful for.
Regarding God of our ancestors, we ask your blessings for our country, for its government, for its leaders and advisors, and for all who exercise just and rightful authority. Teach them insights from your Torah that they may administer all affairs of state fairly, that peace and security, happiness and prosperity, justice and freedom may forever abide in our midst. Creator of all flesh, bless all the inhabitants of our country with your spirit. May citizens of all races and creeds forge a common bond in true harmony, to banish hatred and bigotry, and to safeguard the ideals and free institutions that are the pride and glory of our country. May this land, under your providence, be an influence for good throughout the world, uniting all people in peace and freedom, helping them to fulfill the vision of your prophet. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they experience war anymore. And let us say, Amen.
Amen. And Marge will continue now on page 149.
Avinu Shebashamayim, Sur Yisrael v'goalo, Barech et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Tzmichat Gelotenu. Hagen aleha be'evrat asyecha, ufros aleha sukat shlomecha, ushlach orcha ve'amicha larashecha, sarecha ve'yoetzeha, v'tagnen be'etzat tova milfanecha, chazek et yidei mignei eretz kodshenu, v'hanchalem Eloheinu Yeshua, v'yateret nitzachon ta'atrem, v'natata shalom ba'aretz, v'simchat olam liyoshveha, v'nomar.
Amen. We invite you to remain standing as we turn now to page 153 and prepare to return the Sefer Torah.
Hallelu et Shem Adonai, ki nishkav Shemo levado.
Hoda l'eretz v'shamayim, vayarem keren le'amo.
Tila lechol hasidah, livnei Yisrael am kerovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Etz chaim hi, lama kazek imema, v'tom mepecha meushar. Derachecha, darcheinam, v'kol netivotecha, shalom. Hashivenu
Adonai,
elecha v'nashuva, Kadesh, Kadesh Yameinu, Kadesh Yameinu, kekedem.
we invite you to be seated. It's one of the great joys of our summer services at Beth Shalom congregation is that we get to learn Torah from members of our community. And today's darshan, Rabbi Dr. Steve Brown, is when you think of Jewish education, not only just in the greater Philadelphia area, but if you think about it on a national level, Steve has been at the forefront of some of the most important enterprises in Jewish education, both locally and nationally. Just among his many positions of leadership in Jewish education, include directing AJ's supplementary school, the head of school of the Perlman Jewish Day School, the Jack M. Barrack Hebrew Academy, working on staff and training counselors at Camp Ramah, serving as director of the Melton Research Center of Jewish Education, and as dean of the Davidson School of Education at the Jewish Theological Seminary. He more recently served with the Avichai Foundation, concentrating on training those who would become leaders of Jewish day schools throughout the country. Steve has also studied and is a chaplain, receiving his CPE credits at Albert Einstein Medical Center here in Philadelphia, and then served as a rabbi and chaplain at Paul's Run. He is the author of many articles on Jewish education, on leadership training. He wrote the book that I still go back to over and over again on how to teach tefillah to teens, called Higher and Higher. It's still in my library. I refer to it all the time. And Steve's education includes his BA and BHL from both JTS and Columbia, his master's and doctorate in education from Teachers College of Columbia, and his ordination as a rabbi from the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. He has also been married to one, Steve and Shelley, and Deborah and I are very good friends, and he has been married to Shelley for over 40 years, and who is herself a master Jewish educator. And if you are lucky enough to have children at the Perlman Jewish Day School that Mrs. Brown taught, your kids are much richer for having had her as their teacher. Shelley and Steve are the proud parents of Dory and Eliza, and parents-in-law of Abby, and grandparents of Larry and Robert. And we are very honored that Steve has agreed to teach Torah to us this morning, and we are very much looking forward to your Devar Torah this morning. Without further ado, Rabbi Dr. Steve Brown.
Thank you. I hope the Devar Torah will be as long as the introduction. So before I begin to speak, I want to say a few words. The Parsha is prodigious this week. It's just got all kinds of stuff. I was going to summarize it, but I don't think we have the time. But I did want you to take you're going to need two things right now. You're going to need your Chumash open to, if you would, page 981 to the beginning of the Parasha, and you're going to need your Siddur in your hand. All right. So I titled this talk, Finger Walking. Now, if you remember in the days BG? Before Google, right? There used to be a commercial on television that said, let your fingers do the walking through the yellow pages, right? And every year we would get on our doorstep that big, thick, yellow pages book, right? We'd have to throw out the old one. So I want you to do some finger walking with me today. But before we actually do that, I wanted to comment on the opening verses of this week's Parashah Vayet Hanan. And I'm going to take a little exception to the beautiful way Rabbi GK interpreted this little opening section, where once again Moses is begging God to let him go to the promised land, and God says, Ravlach. And Rabbi interpreted that beautifully, like you had a lot, you have it good, but really I think the real reading of it is enough. I told you once, I told you twice, no, you're not going to the promised land. Now, if you want a little bit, go up that hill and take a look, all right? And what this did for me was to trigger a wonderful memory of many years ago. Shelley and I went to Israel in 1996 for a CAGE conference, a conference on alternatives in Jewish education. Hundreds of Jewish educators from all over the world were there, Jerusalem. And at the end of the conference, a bunch of us got together and we went on a trip to Jordan because we wanted to see this remarkable city called Petra, which is down in the south of, down near Eilat. Petra was, built by the Nabateans, and it's this incredible emotional moment where you go through this narrow cliff in the rocks, and you see these incredible temples and palaces carved into the stone of this site. It's an overwhelming, it's really got to be one of the wonders of the world. But on the way down We stayed in Amman one night, and it was a beautiful hotel with a swimming pool. I couldn't believe this was Jordan. And so then we get on the bus the next day, we start going south. And the bus at one point stops and goes up a little hill. And we get to the top of the hill, we get off the bus, and we're told that this is Har Nebo. This is Mount Nebo. Now here in this text, God doesn't name it. But in the last few verses of the Torah, which we'll read on Simchat Torah, it talks about Moses going up to Har Nebo, and there he sees the land, and then he disappears. Now, so we were standing at that spot, and I was reading the Hebrew to everybody, and I was in tears, because as you look down, you see the entire land of Israel spread before you from this hill. You see the Mediterranean in the west, you see the Negev in the south, you see the mountains in the north. It's like you're in an airplane looking down at the map of Israel. And it's an incredible spot, and you also understand how vulnerable Israel is to enemy fire if they were ever to lob rockets from there. But that Har Nebo is what's referenced to in this text right now. And I just wanted to mention that because it evokes in me a really emotional reaction to that moment. Now, I want you to do some finger walking with me, okay? And we're going to look at some interesting things that this parasha is replete with quotes that you say all the time, but you don't realize where they come from. The rabbis were the great cutter and pasters, or copier and pasters, right? They took stuff from all over and they pasted it in the Siddur, but often we don't know why or where they took it from, but they took a lot of it from this parasha. So what I'd like you to do first is, if you would look at page 107 in your Chumash. 1007. 1007, right? 1007. Okay? Okay, and we're going to look at verse 4 on that page. Verse 4 is, V'atem, look at on page 4, right? V'atem advekim adonai alechem chayim kolchem hayom. All right, anybody recognize that? Open your Siddur. Now this is where I want you to finger walking to page 141. Open your Siddur to page 141. This is, again, use your fingers, right? 141. And where does it occur? After whoever's in charge of the Torah reading calls up the Leot, right? And if you look at the very bottom of the page, V'atem advekim b'Adonai lechem chayim kolchem hayom, right? This is why the rabbis picked this verse to put it there. I don't know, but we say it every time we read Torah, and it kind of slips through, but it comes from this parasha. Now let's do a second one, and this one will be a little harder for you to figure out. Page 4. Go to the same page, I'm sorry, page 1013. Page 1013. Okay, and if you would look at verse 4, verse 4 and 10:13.
There's not a verse 4.
I'm sorry.
Chapter 4.
That's chapter 4, I went to verse 35. Got it?
Yep.
So, can somebody read it to me? Okay, anybody know where that comes from?
Sarah? Sarah knows.
Sarah, you know? Where? It's Simchat Torah. It's the beginning, if you turn in your Chumash, in your Siddur, to page 213. You'll see that it's the beginning of the Hakafot for Simchat Torah. Ataharet haladat, right? And that's the way we begin the Hakafot for the Simchat Torah celebration. So that's also coming out of this parasha. Now let's do a little bit more finger walking and go to page 1014. Or back to page 1014, and we're going to take verse 39. In the middle of the page, 10:14. Ve'adata hayom v'ashevota elav avecha ki Adonai hu Elohim v'shamayim ma'al v'la'aretz mitachat ein od. Where's that? Where do you find that in the Siddur? Aleinu, right. If you open up to page whatever it is in the Siddur, page 183, you'll find it in the middle of the Aleinu. Now, why they took that snippet and they put it in Aleinu, anybody's guess, okay? But somehow they felt that it was appropriate to cut and paste it and put it in there. Now we get to the next one, which excites me the most, on page 1014, right? And we're going to look at verse 44. And what do you see? V'zo Torah asher sam Moshe lifnei b'nei Yisrael. Now, I want to say a few words about this particular V'zo Torah. Here at Beth Sholom, when do we raise the Torah? After we read it, right? In Sephardic congregations, it's raised before we read it. Now, you could ask yourself the question, which is better, to raise it before, so that this is what we're going to read, or to raise it afterwards, this is what we read. Now, our neighboring congregation down the street, up the street, AJ, was led for many, many years by Rabbi Max Klein, and he was very much interested in Sephardic liturgy, and he added to the AJ prayer book some Sephardic nuances and pieces. And in AJ, I don't know if they still do it, but for decades, the Torah is raised before it is read, and it goes to the following melody. Here's where I'm glad Cantor Agar is here. And it goes like this. V'zo Torah asher sam Moshe livnei b'nei Yisrael livnei b'nei Yisrael al pi Adonai yachanu v'al pi Adonai yisa'u et mishmeret Adonai shamaru al pi Adonai v'yad Moshe. He adds a Sephardic insert there. Let me say the melody again. V'zo Torah asher sam Moshe livnei b'nei Yisrael livnei b'nei Yisrael. Anybody know where that melody comes from? Well, I'll give you one other clue. Rabbi Klein was an opera buff. He loved opera. Listened to opera all the time, even on Shabbos. Right? It is the final scene in the Gounod's Faust, which is a very, very long opera, but it's the final scene where Marguerite is asking for redemption and forgiveness for her sins, and in this gorgeous lyric soprano, she sings da 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 da. And Rabbi Klein was so smitten by this melody that he made sure that at AJ, forever after, this would be the melody by which they sing V'zo Torah. So I always get a thrill when I hear it done and when I listen to the opera piece. You can go to, if you want to Google it, go to YouTube, and on YouTube you can look for the final scene in Faust, and you'll hear the melody. Okay, so that's the biggie, V'zo Torah. Now, let's look at the next issue from this parasha, and if you would turn to page 1014. I'm sorry, page 1014, and I want to get us to the Seratat Dibrot, which was, I think I put the wrong page here. I'm sorry, 10:19. 10:19. Right? And we have in the middle of the page the commandment for Shabbat, right? And what does it say? It says, Shmor et Yom HaShabbat l'kodsho. What's the problem with that? Now, this is supposed to be a repetition by Moshe of what was given in Exodus. What does it say in Exodus? It says, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat l'kodsho. Changes the word. So the Siddur solves the problem for us. If you open up your Siddur to page yeah, right, to the Lachadodi at page 21. Use your fingers and open up your Siddur to page 21. Right, you probably were here last night, maybe you sang it. Page 21 in Kabbalat Shabbat. And it's the beginning of the Chadodi, right? And what does it say? Shamor v'zachor b'dibor echad. And the translation is, keep and remember were uttered as one. Now today we know with our high-tech synthesizers, right, we can run 2 tracks of singers like Barbra Streisand in California can be singing with, I don't know, somebody from New York, and they can run the 2 tracks together, and they're in different places, but it sounds like they're in the same room singing simultaneously, right? So only God can do this. Can say 2 words at the same time, Zachor and Shamor together, and the Chadodi solves the problem for us. That Shamor v'Zachor b'dibor echad, they were said as one, which solves the problem of why is one text different than the other text in the Torah. Okay, and I just want to take you on one more little jaunt, but this one you already know. If you go to page 1024, what do we have there? I don't even have to show you where it is in the Siddur because you will be able to find it. And it was read so beautifully by Moshe this morning. I was very grateful to hear that chant that he uses to read the Torah. And what do we have? The Shema. This is the source of the Shema and the V'ahavta, this parasha. So what I think is exciting about this particular parasha is you have all of these verses that we say all the time in the liturgy, but the rabbis didn't use quotes and they didn't use citations, right? They just cut and paste them and put them in there, and you've got to know where they came from. And I think this is one of the most amazing things about Jewish tradition, that you can almost get into any piece of it from any other place. So if you go to the Siddur, it'll take you back to the Torah. If you go to the Torah, it takes you to the Siddur or to rabbinic literature. Now, the rabbis, by the way, did a gloss on Vayet Hanan, and when Moses is pleading with God. And if you add up the letters in Vayet Hanan, the gematria, each Hebrew letter stands for a number, it's 515. So the rabbi said that Moshe prayed 515 times for God to let him go across the land, and God said, Ravlach, enough. No, you're not going. I don't care how many times you pray to me. But I think for us, it's exciting to see how all these texts interweave and give us meaning. And when we read them in the Torah, they reflect back on the Siddur that we know so well. I think that for me, this play on Hebrew texts and the interweaving of the Hebrew texts is what's exciting about knowing the liturgy and knowing Torah and being able to figure out how the two blend together. So I just wanted to give you this little finger walking tour of this week's parasha together with the Siddur, so that you now know where things come from. Now, I brought show and tell. I brought this Siddur, which is called Siddur Tfilot Hashanah, and it is the daily prayer book edited by Dr. Joseph Hertz, who was the former chief rabbi of the British Empire. You remember before Eitz Chaim, we all had the Hertz Chumash, right? It was the same Hertz. He edited that book too, And then gradually, the conservative movement felt they needed a more updated version of it. But he put together a Siddur, which is the complete Siddur, all the services of the year. And in the margins, he glosses, you can't see it obviously from where you're sitting, every single source that the verse comes from in the Siddur. Now, the biggest source for the Siddur is what? What? The Tanakh. What's the biggest source of lifting of things for the Siddur? Tehillim, right? The Book of Psalms, right? Pezukei de Zimra, Shir Shel Yom, the daily Psalms, Hallel, right? There's special Psalms for special occasions. So that's the biggest lift. But throughout the Siddur, there are all these other little pickups from the Torah, from the Tanakh. And what he did was, in very tiny print in the margins, he lists exactly the source for every one of these quotes. So if you really want to understand where things come from, get yourself a copy of this Hertz. I think it's still available somewhere, and you can really have fun sort of figuring out why they picked that verse and why did they stick it in there. So I wanted to do something a little bit different this morning by just giving you this quick finger walking through the Siddur and the Torah, and I want to wish you a Shabbat Shalom, and thank you for taking the journey with me.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, and thank you for the water.
We want to thank Dr. Brown, Rabbi Dr. Brown, Steve, for teaching us this morning and helping us to have a deeper appreciation of the connection between text, Tanakh, and prayer. Again, thank you for being our teacher, Steve. We're going to continue as we prepare to conclude with the Musaf service. Again, we invite you to turn back to your Siddur as the Chazan will lead us. The Chatzi Kaddish is found on page 155, and we invite you to rise if you are able.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה ביעלמדי ורקירותי במליק מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. ישמי רבה מבורך לעולם עולם המאיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפואר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו אלא מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דהמירן ביעלמה ויאמרו אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו אלוהי אברהם אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה. האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון גומל חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות, ומביא גואל לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה רב ליושיע. מוריד הטל, מכלכל חיים בחסד. בחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. וממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה ונאמנת לך חיות מתים ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים.
שרפי קודש ומקדישים שמך בקודש ככתוב בנביאך. כרזה אל זה ואמר.
נעריצך נקדישך כצוציח שרפי קודש המקדישים שמך בקודש ככתוב לנביאך וכרזה לזה ואמר.
קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך כל הארץ כבודו.
קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך כל הארץ כבודו כבודו מלא מלא עולם חיי מקום כבודו כבודו מלא מלא עולם חיי מקום כבודו כבודו מלא מלא עולם משרת אף שואלים שואלים זה לזה חיי מקום כבודו משרת אף שואלים שואלים זה לזה חיי מקום כבודו ליומתם ברוך יאמרו
ברוך אדוני
ברוך אדוני ממקומו ממקומו הוא יפם ברחמים ויחונם המייחדים שמו ערב בבוקר בכל יום תמיד פעמיים ביבא שמע שמע אומרים
שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהים אדוני אחד.
שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד הוא אלוהינו הוא אבינו הוא מלכנו הוא מושיענו והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו שנית יענה כל החי להיות לכם לאלוהים.
אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
אני אדוני אלוהיכם ובדברי קודשך כתוב לאמור
ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור הללויה.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור הללויה לדור ודור לדור ודור לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד כי אל מלך גדול כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה לדור ודור לדור ודור לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. תיקנת שבת רצית קורבנותיך רצית בשקט אז מי יסנם סבו עליך
Those of you who are still davening, please continue. Those of you concluded can turn ahead with us to page 181 and Kaddish Shalem.
יתקדש שמי רבה, ביעלמדי ורקירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון ובכל כל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. ישמרה מאורך לעולם ועמיה יתברך. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ותהלל לשם קודשה ברכו לעילה מן כה ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונקמתה דמירם ביעלמה ויאמרו אמן. תתקבע סותכון ובאו תכון דכל ישראל וכל המבוהון דבישמעיה ויאמרו אמן. יש לומר במי שמעיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום יברומם הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן.
We'll remain standing for Aleinu, page 183.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי ארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות אדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. שוטו שמי וספק הנה לכם על כן נקבל לך נוהל לראות מהרה בתפארת הזך עליה ובסוף לפניך נלהים ככתוב בתורתך אדוני מלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
I invite you to be seated. As a community, we express our condolences to Dan Norris and to his family on the passing this past week of his father, Gerald Norris, Zichrono Livracha. And at this time, we invite any of you who are in the process of mourning or observing a yard site to rise and join with me in Mourner's Kaddish on page 184. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba. Yalmad yivrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala uvizman kariv v'yimru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevorach li'olam omei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudasha barichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tush b'chata v'nechamata damiran v'alma v'yimru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru.
Amen.
We ask God, who brings peace and comfort on high, to bring peace and comfort to those of you remembering your loved ones. We want to thank everyone for being here, and so many of you for making services beautiful this morning. We want to thank Stephanie Love and Moshe Hezekiah for reading Torah for us so beautifully this morning. We want to thank Warren Vogel for chanting Haftarah. We want to thank Rabbi Dr. Steve Brown for his teaching to us this morning. And we want to thank all of you who were gabais, had aliyot, and helped make the service happen today. I want to just actually, I think that most people in this room who are our regulars feel comfortable eating food indoors, but we are just wondering, and in particular if there are those who might be on the Zoom, if some people who might not stay to eat would be happier staying if at a beautiful day like today there was a table outside, if there was food. So if anyone would like us to have during nice weather days outdoor tables, if you could just let me know, and if you're on the Zoom and you're listening, and if you could email me. We are just trying to see if that some people who might not stay for lunch might be more willing to stay on days that it was nice if they were outdoors. So just let me know. You can see me at Kiddush. You can email me after Shabbos. But that's something that we're considering, just to invite more people who would potentially want to stay if we had outdoor possibilities. I believe next Shabbat, Randy Sable will be offering Devar Torah. She and Don are going to be coming back from Israel this week. God willing, we're looking forward to hearing from them. Just a couple of things to let you know about for this upcoming week. There will not be choir rehearsal this Thursday. I will be teaching on Tuesday night at 8. I'm going to be teaching from Alan Liu's book, which is about the 7-week period from Tisha B'Av to Rosh Hashanah, called This is Real and You Are Completely Unprepared. It is a guide to the spiritual potential of these preparatory days for the start of a new year. So we'll join at 8 o'clock on Zoom on Tuesday night. Other important events to make you aware of: a week from Wednesday, we'd love as many of you who might be interested in learning about the fact that Federation is sponsoring a mission to Israel for Israel's 75th anniversary, and we are hoping that we have a bus full of Beth Shalom congregants who want to go. So if you want to learn more about that, it's at 7:30 on Wednesday the 24th via Zoom. It's kind of a parlor meeting to help you learn more about what the trip will be like. Let's see, other important dates. There is going to be Renee is helping us to make sure we do the mitzvah of helping to save lives through the giving of blood on Tuesday, August 30th. There will be blood donation possibilities for you here. We hope that many of you will participate. Bob Rubin leads weekly current events every other week, I should say, first and third Thursday of the month at 10 a.m. Carol Nemiroff leads mindfulness meditation on Monday evening and Wednesday morning at 10. And we want to invite, and next Friday night, we want to just make you aware that the Cantor is doing a reprise of his very well-received Blues and Craft Beer Shabbat. That's right. Blues and what? Blues and Brews. Maybe that's what it should be. That's great. With Myron and Louise's son's craft brewery providing the brew for the Blues and Brews. So we hope that many of you will be here next Friday for that at 6 p.m. Without further ado, we'll look forward to seeing many of you in the Fishman Auditorium for Kiddush. We conclude with Adon Olam on page 187.
Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yetzir nibra v'et nasa v'hefzo kol אזי מלך שמו נקרא, אחרי ככלות הכל. לבדו ימלוך נורא, והוא היה והוא הווה, והוא יהיה בתפארה, והוא אחד ואין שני. להמשלו להכבירה, בלי ראשית בלי תכלית, ולא העוז והמשרה, והוא אלי וחי גואלי, וצור חבלי בצרה, והוא ניסי ומנוס לי, מנת כוסי ביום אקרא, ידו אפקיד רוחי, וישן ויעירה, ועם רוחי גבייתי, אדוני לי ולא יירא.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. יישר כוח. That's very nice to hear Moshe.
Yeah. So we'll meet with him on Tuesday?
Yeah, did we set a time?
I guess let's set it maybe now with him.
Yeah. I actually don't have to check my calendar for Tuesday, but yeah. Also, Thursday.
Oh yeah.
It would.
Usually.
You didn't have to do that.
Oh really?
Well, I mean, it would be. It's nice.
Yes.
It's nice.
There we go.
Good Shabbat.
Good
Shabbat
Shabbat.
shalom to everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Cantor and Cantor Shani.
There he is.
Good to see everybody there. Yes,
know.
come out.
Hey, Bill, I got demoted again. I'm sleepy. Now I'm still Shani. Okay. Hassan says I'm Shani still.
Are you two
Right,
matching
yeah.
again?
Nice to see you guys.
Yeah. See,
Sort of.
he got the dress code, Judy. He's got the dress code.
I wonder if I could be Cantor wishy-washy.
Yeah, Abdallah at 8 o'clock. Everybody.
What's that?
So long.
Abdallah, 8 o'clock.
Shabbat shalom.
Oh, 8 o'clock.
Right
And Rob, great lift as always.
Love you, Judy Shapiro.
Have a good date night. And
Sorry, Nate.
I don't know if the Cantor can still hear me. Tell him he did a great job last night. As always.
That first song was unbelievable.
I'm getting them for you, Judy. Right here, Judy. Right there.
Cantor,
Judy,
just
you started writing it at 3:30 in the
always,
afternoon.
not a surprise. You did a phenomenal job last night.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Judy.
And I just giggle when I hear how you just sat down and wrote like 5 new songs that day. So it's quite a talent. Thank you for enriching us, and thank you for training my dear friend Rob so well.
Oh yes.
I only learn from the best, Judy.
You got it there. So you're both great, and thank you. And I'm sure I'm speaking for Bill too. Thank you for coming over to the Zoom and saying hi to us.
Yes, it's nice to be recognized by you.
Thank
You're all very, very important. And
How about a little Vizot Torah, Bill Loy? Because Hagba.
Hey, give me a Vizos, man. Give me that.
He even mentioned that today, didn't he? He mentioned something today in the Devorah Torah. He mentioned something about that. Did you hear that?
Well, I'd like to know if it was done beforehand. Do you think you'd be able to lift it the same way?
Well, you're giving me a Kinahara?
just as a question, Cantor, in the Sephardic shuls where the Torahs are in those big heavy cases, do they lift them also?
they do, yeah. It's actually they lift it. It's actually I think easier to lift it because it's not so wobbly. It's a hard metal case, so you just lift it like this.
But isn't it really heavy?
Oh, it's not so heavy. No, I didn't hold it, but it doesn't look like it's heavy.
I've done it quite a few
It's
times myself. I could
right?
understand if it's not shaky, how
Well,
much
that's true.
easier it
It's-
would be
Yeah,
It's
if it's
it's a
steady.
solid box. So
You
they
got your
should-
boy Hassan Shaney in the house. He can handle it. No problem. No problem.
yeah.
I stopped lifting when my back went south.
Oh, very nice.
All right, everyone. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom, everybody. Love you all.
Love you
Bill,
guys.
Lori, Judy, Shapiro, love you guys.
Good Shabbos. I may miss or be late tonight for Havdalah. It starts at 8. I've got date night like Rob, but we try to go early so I can be home in time.
Wait,
But we'll see.
why is it
I don't
starting
know
at
if you ever heard this stuff, but he never mentions me. He mentions the Gabayim. He mentions everybody else. He doesn't mention me lifting Torah. He doesn't mention me.
He doesn't mention the Zoom Shane.
No, nothing. I'm getting pretty soon. They're going to ask me to vacuum the rugs and wash the windows. Who knows?
Judy, last night, what I wrote, because what I was concerned about, I know he can't come over to the mic when the people are talking about who they lost, who they're saying Kaddish for, but it would be nice if it would just say, and for those on Zoom, also,
Yeah, I felt that empty. And I wrote you back, and then it said, Bill Loy cannot receive these messages.
Yeah, that's weird. Because I was wondering, I figured you would have normally wrote something back.
Yeah, I did. I wrote back that once again, you and I were on the same page, that it was, I just felt so empty that and don't they have, well, maybe not when they're in the atrium, but don't they have a big screen where they can see us?
Yeah, they do. It's not that so much. I'm not sure. I don't think there's any agenda there that's trying to force us to come in. I just think it's a top of mindedness that needs to be there, for some recognition. I know, look, you can't bring the mic over to the Zoom and have everybody do that. I understand that, but it would be nice to conclude by saying, and those on Zoom, we include as well or something. It'd be nice.
Or just, now I know that my friend Jacques, who's the executive director at Shari Shemayim, I'm not technical, so it kind of went over my head a little while he was telling it to me, but he said something about how when they end services, they, all the people like in the Zoom put their boxes on, and the people in the congregation talk to the people in the Zoom boxes, and the Zoom people can talk to them, so that they end every service, by being able to.
That's kind of nice. Listen, when the Cantor and Rob come over, they're talking to us.
Right.
Everybody who wants to could stand 10, 15 feet away and say good Shabbos, and we could do the same. And you just change your view from I have it on gallery right now where I can see you and Robbie who are left, and Shabbat Shalom, Robbie. But at that point, you put it on a gallery, you could see whoever is on,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, I didn't quite understand what Jacques was explaining to me because that stuff goes right over my head. But I got the part where people can talk to each other.
Nothing technical. I mean, the Cantor comes over, he unmutes it, and whoever is over wants to come over says hello. That's all.
Well, maybe that's all they do. Maybe people just come over. I thought
they can't step into the picture.
And I don't know. Now, I don't know what the setup is when they're in the atrium, like last night. I'm not sure.
It's the same thing, because I could see they had two views, one of the Cantor and the Rabbi, and the other one of actually they didn't. Last night they just had the one screen, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I don't know, but
that doesn't matter. I mean, on that particular camera, you can also see it's set for Zoom. You can see who's on it or not.
Right. And, then maybe
it doesn't matter who he sees personally. It's just that he addresses the group as being included. That's all.
Right.
Nice.
So, I don't know. But when Robbie said that before, that he wasn't recognized, I thought Rabbi did do a whole joke about him earlier on about being no, like in the earlier part of the service. Maybe not.
I don't know.
maybe, I don't know, I'm a little out of it today, so I'm not sure what I heard and what I didn't hear. And I missed Steve Brown's
Can you
DeVar
guys hear me
completely.
at all? Can you guys hear me at all?
Yes,
Yeah,
sure.
I can hear you. Go ahead, Ron.
Oh, okay. Because I think it would be very, very nice too, because you kind of feel disenfranchised when you're on Zoom, especially not so much when we do Havdalah because we're all on Zoom, but you feel disenfranchised from the congregation. I would love to go back in person. I really miss it, but my circumstances right now don't allow me to do that. I hope that for high holidays they're going to continue to do
They're saying
Zoom
what? We just
or
lost
live
you.
stream. I hope for high holidays they're going to continue to do Zoom.
Yeah, I don't think they're stopping it. I don't think they're going to ever stop it. I think they have to take into consideration people that can't get out.
They can't get out.
Period.
Yeah.
Even if it's 2 or 3 people, it doesn't cost anything really to do this.
Right, because now we have the technology. They had said that they were going to do something. Was it Men's Club was supposed to be giving money for increased technology or something? Did it ever
Yeah,
happen?
to enhance the sound system. That's for inside in the sanctuary at the sisterhood.
Okay, I'm just asking because I know that like last high holidays, I went on. My kids out in California belong to Valley Beth Sholom because they have to because the kids go to the day school there. Talk about a racket. You can only get away with that in Los Angeles. You got to join the shul in order to go to the day school that is in some way part of the shul. So,
wow.
They're allowed to do like an assistant membership or something. That costs almost $4,000. So I can't even imagine what the real membership costs. But their actual synagogue is Agar. If you've ever heard about that, that's Sharon Brous, who's like really famous as a conservative rabbi. And
you told us about it last year. Judy.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. But aside from being amazing, and there's so many Philadelphians there, it's like, and the who's who of Philadelphians kids are there, like T-Gay and Messinger and, so many of those. But the who's who of Jewish, like, education circles. I don't mean like the who's who of the rich. I don't know the who's who of the rich. But but at Agar and also at my son's shul in North Jersey, they get so many views. They have all kinds of like amazing things, like when you're watching it, that and we don't have anything. We just sit and look at one spot. And for some reason in the sisterhood, we don't even get to see the bima when it's in the sisterhood. It's just, we get to see the people sitting there. So I'm not sure why we can't, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what I can ask my son. He probably knows, what his shul Bethel in North Jersey is doing. But, the views are just all over, and you can see, when people are marching, and you can see on the beam, and you can see in the audience. And so I don't know. So that's not what Men's Club was going to contribute to, Bill?
No, that's got nothing to do with it. It's simply the enhancement of the audio system in both the sisterhood and in the main, because some of the technology is still analog, from what I understand, and we have to convert everything to digital. So they put up a lot of money for the initial improvements in the sound system, and they came back and asked us, for additional, which we agreed to. So. But yeah, that's got nothing to do with the Zoom.
Okay, so I mean,
I'm not looking for any real improvements on Zoom. I'd be happy if it's what it is, but you just be acknowledged.
Right. Well, I think.
I'm sorry, Judy.
No, I think, Robbie, to answer your question, unless I'm remembering wrong, I don't think it was Zoom for the high holidays. I think it was just live stream.
You might be right about
that.
Oh,
yeah, it was live stream.
You might be right about that. But I think that your son's show, when you ask them in North Jersey, you'll find that they might have screens strategically placed all through more than one, whereas at Beth Sholom, we only have the one in the front there, based on what I can see when when I'm on Zoom. So that's what might allow them to have more, look at the bema, to look around the sanctuary. They might have multiple that are all connected some way, somehow. It's almost like a ring camera that can look at various views.
And as I think about it, it probably won't be Zoom for high holidays. It'll probably just be live stream.
Well, which is a shame, or at least if it could be done, and maybe I'll suggest this, I don't know who to suggest it to, but it would be nice if they were able to do something that when the services ended, that those who wanted to, who were not there, could have a Zoom link, and others could be standing there talking. So it could almost be like, the end of services when everybody's schmoozing together. I mean, it ain't like we're getting 5,000 people to services anymore. So, I don't.
Not like we have 5,000 members anymore.
It would, what else would also be nice? If via Zoom, there was some way, somehow, that they could let people in the Zoom community participate, not just sit there and be muted.
Oh.
It would make you feel more included in the congregation.
Right.
Because at this point, you're not able to go to services physically. Doesn't mean that you'll never be able to go back physically. I'm hopeful for the day that I'll someday be able to go back physically as well.
Right. Yeah, that's well, the only time they did it, Robbie, was when the first year of COVID. That Yontif, they had some people came in, like sort of one at a time and did certain things. And then I think some people, we were all on Zoom, right? Except for the clergy who was in there.
I think some people recorded in advance of it, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
They wore their Rosh Hashanah wear, and they came in as families in advance, especially for the Aliyot during the Torah reading.
Right, except for my 16-year-old grandson who had a Torah honor and came into the shul to have
I have to go. Good Shabbos.
I hope.
If I don't see it tonight, we'll catch up, okay? I'll try.
Why are we doing it at 8? Is that so because it's easier?
I know, to accommodate Larry.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Hopefully, we'll see everybody later.
Hopefully, I'm in a car right now. That's why I'm like in and out here.
Oh, go ahead. I'm Robbie, just tell me one thing, because I think I'm losing my mind completely. And I don't want to talk about it on Zoom, but because of you, but did I ever answer your text from the other day when you said you're home? Because last night I did not. Oh my God.
Don't feel bad. I knew that you have other things. I'm not your main concern. But
no.
You asked me to let you know. I wasn't even offended. I was just worried that something was going on with you. And then I wanted to write to you during services yesterday, but I'm ashamed to say this. I was kind of still working and going to services simultaneously.
I've never seen anybody who has such a good Jewish heart, who is always beating up on herself that she's not doing enough ritually. I don't think that's the important thing. Is how you deal with other people and the kindness is in your heart and the Jewish that you do despite having physical limitations. So please don't and don't ever try to do anything like fasting or things like that can jeopardize your health. It's really more of a sin than anything else. So, but don't beat up on yourself for, you were on services, which is more than 99% of the congregation. So, whether or not you were multitasking or not, that's not the important thing. And like I said, it's your beautiful neshama that is I think, I'm not a rabbi, so I don't know, but in my humble opinion, that that God is more impressed with that than how many rituals you are doing and how many you're not doing. So no, I'm
Thank
not,
you, because I'm so behind, Judy, because I was really out of the office 2.5 days. The thing with Jordana on Tuesday was totally unexpected, and I meant to catch up. So then my management took that as an opportunity to say that they want me to do a bunch of stuff by the end of the month. And the only option I had was week on Friday during the summer. We're finished at 4,
right.
but I needed to do some stuff and get some stuff out that was really, really important. And normally I would have given it to one of my assistants, but they were gone, so I was doing it.
Well, I think it's great that you were on. And I am